No contact breaks avoidance in a way you never expected. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like the more love and closeness you gave someone, the more they pulled away? You opened your heart and you showed up. You were there. And in return, they started acting distant, cold, confused. One day they wanted you. The next they disappeared into the fog. Sound familiar? Chances are you were dealing with an avoidant. And here's the kicker. The very thing you fear doing, walking away, might be the only thing that ever reaches them. Why? Because no contact doesn't just create silence. It creates a mirror. And that mirror reflects something an avoidant rarely gets to see life without you. See, avoidants are masters of control. They build emotional distance to feel safe. But when you suddenly stop chasing, stop texting, stop trying to fix it, you remove their safety net. And for the first time, they're left with something terrifying, their own feelings. No contact doesn't punish someone. It's not a game. It's a powerful act of self-respect that forces emotional clarity on both sides. And here's the unexpected part. It doesn't just challenge them. It frees you. It breaks you out of the cycle of anxiety. It reminds you of your value, and it makes room for someone who doesn't run when things get real. So if you're scared to let go, remember this: you're not losing them. You're finding you. When you're emotionally available and genuinely interested in someone, it's natural to show affection, initiate conversations, and try to build closeness. That's how healthy connections are formed. But when you're dealing with someone with an avoidant attachment style, this natural impulse often backfires. Instead of deepening the bond, your efforts to get closer may trigger their instinct to pull away, and that can feel incredibly confusing because you're doing everything right. You're being open, vulnerable, consistent. Meanwhile, they're retreating, acting cold, or becoming emotionally distant. This reaction isn't necessarily about you. It's about how they relate to intimacy. Avoidants often grow up in environments where closeness was inconsistent, overwhelming, or even unsafe. As a result, they learn to protect themselves by keeping emotional distance. When things start to feel too intimate, when someone gets too close, they begin to feel emotionally crowded, the very thing that most people crave in a relationship. Connection, closeness, emotional availability can feel like pressure or even danger to them. So what happens when you try harder, when you text more, express your feelings, or try to check in with them? It might feel like you're simply being caring or try and understand what's going on, but to an avoidant, this can feel like a demand for more than they are ready or willing to give. The result, they withdraw further. They stop replying as quickly. They say they need space. Or worse, they ghost you. It creates a painful cycle. The more you give, the more they pull away, and the more you chase, hoping to fix the disconnect. This dynamic leaves you feeling like you're doing too much, while simultaneously feeling like you're still not enough. The truth is, avoids aren't people. They're often emotionally overwhelmed people, but your desire for intimacy threatens their emotional safety, even when it's well-intentioned. They interpret closeness not as comfort, but as a loss of autonomy. And because they equate emotional dependence with vulnerability, they build walls the moment they feel someone trying to break them down. Understanding this pattern is crucial because it helps you stop taking their distance personally. It's not that your love is too much. It's that their capacity to receive it is limited. That doesn't mean you need to shrink yourself or love less. It means you need to recognize the pattern before you get caught in it. The more you try to convince an avoidant to open up, the more they retreat into themselves. Your love starts to feel like pressure. Your presence, which should feel comforting, begins to feel like a threat to their sense of control. That's the paradox of dealing with an avoiding. What nurtures most relationships can feel suffocating to them. And until they learn to regulate their fear of closeness, any attempt to bridge the gap can leave you feeling rejected, confused, and emotionally exhausted. When you decide to go no contact with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, it may feel like you're stepping into a void, like silence will only push them further away. But in reality, that silence does something powerful. It removes the emotional safety net they've been relying on. While avoidants appear independent and detached on the surface, many of them are only able to stay emotionally distant because they know someone is still there in the background. That subtle presence, your texts, your emotional availability, your continued interest, gives them a quiet reassurance. It allows them to keep their distance while still feeling connected on their terms. When you suddenly remove that presence, when you stop reaching out, stop showing out, and stop trying to maintain the connection, the game changes entirely. No contact takes away their ability to control the emotional temperature of the relationship. And for someone who is used to dictating the pace, deciding when things are too close, and retreating whenever vulnerability starts to appear, this is deeply unsettling. The silence you create isn't just absence. It becomes a mirror that reflects their own behavior back at them. And for the first time, they're forced to sit with the reality of life without you actively in it. This can be an incredibly sobering experience for an avoidant. With no messages to ignore, no affection to sidestep, and no conversations to withdraw from. They're left alone with the weight of their own decisions. Avoidants often convince themselves that they don't need anyone. That independence is their strength. But when the person who always reached out disappears, the narrative starts to crack. The absence you leave behind forces them to confront the consequences of emotional avoidance. Not in a dramatic or vindictive way, but in a quiet, internal reckoning. It's in this space that reflection begins. They may not show it outwardly or respond right away. In fact, they might double down on their independence at first. But over time, they start to feel the shift. The emotional dynamic has changed. You're no longer someone they can count on to always be there, no matter how they behave. You've taken control of your side of the story. And in doing so, you introduce uncertainty, something they're not used to feeling. This uncertainty is powerful. For avoidance, predictability is safety. Knowing that you'll always come back, always check in, always hold space for them gives them permission to stay emotionally stagnant. When that's removed, they are pushed into discomfort, and that discomfort can be a catalyst, not necessarily for them to chase you, but for them to face themselves. It forces them to question why they distanced themselves in the first place, why they sabotage closeness, why they're afraid of something that should feel safe. No contact isn't about manipulating someone into coming back. It's about breaking a pattern that only exists because you kept participating. And when you stop participating, you stop cushioning the consequences of their avoidance, leaving them to feel the full impact of what they've lost. Creating distance through no contact isn't just about shaking up the other person, about creating space for emotional clarity on both sides. When you've been emotionally entangled with someone who constantly pulls away or sends mixed signals, it's easy to lose perspective. Your energy goes into decoding their behavior, managing your reactions, and trying to hold the connection together. That dynamic keeps you emotionally flooded and often blinds you to your own needs, values, and emotional health. The moment you step back and go no contact, you allow the emotional fog clear. No contact is like turning off the noise so you can finally hear your own voice, without the constant mental loops. Should I text? Why did they act like that? Did I do something wrong? You're able to reconnect with yourself. You start to see things more objectively, without the emotional roller coaster clouding your judgment. Sometimes clarity comes in realizing that you are holding onto a relationship based on potential, not reality. You see that your efforts were often about managing their emotional discomfort instead of honoring your own emotional truth. You may even recognize patterns in yourself, like the need to fix, to chase, or to prove your worth, that you didn't see before because you were too busy trying not to lose them. But this clarity doesn't just happen on your side. The avoidant person also begins to experience a shift. When they no longer have access to your emotional availability, they're left with their own silence. Avoidants are used to having emotional space, but it's usually a space filled with the reassurance that someone still cares. When that reassurance disappears, they start to feel the difference between chosen solitude and actual emotional absence. This space forces them to reflect in a way that rarely happens when you're still in the picture, even peripherally. At first, they might feel relief. That's normal. Avoidants often need distance to feel emotionally safe. But over time, the lack of contact removes their ability to regulate through avoidance. The person who made it easy to stay emotionally disengaged is no longer there, and that creates new internal experience. They might start wondering why they don't feel peace even though the pressure is gone. They might question whether their need for distance has left them more isolated than independent. And in some cases, they begin to see the emotional cost of their avoidance not just to others, but to themselves. This mutual clarity is why no contact is so powerful. It creates a natural pause where emotions can settle and truth can rise to the surface. It reveals not only how the other person feels about you, but also how you feel about them when you're not trying to win them over. Sometimes what you realize is that you were clinging to someone who never truly met you halfway. Other times, it reveals that they were afraid but not indifferent, and now they must decide whether to face their fears or continue running. Either way, both of you get something you couldn't find in constant contact, a moment of honest reflection. Walking away from someone you care about never feels easy, especially when part of you still hopes they come back or realize your worth. But when you decide to go no contact, especially with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, it's essential to understand that you're not punishing them. You're protecting yourself. It's not about revenge or teaching someone a lesson. It's about reclaiming your emotion space and choosing to prioritize your self-worth over your attachment to someone who can't or won't meet you halfway. A lot of people hesitate to go no contact because it feels cruel or final. You might worry that you're abandoning someone or giving up on the connection too soon. But staying in a situation where you're constantly being emotionally starved or made to question your value isn't love, it's self-neglect. No contact is an act of aggression, it's an act of self-respect. It says, I care about myself enough to walk away from what's hurting me, even if part of me still wants to stay. That's not weakness. That's strength. That's maturity. When you remove yourself from the dynamic, you're sending a clear message, not through anger or ultimatums, but through action. You're saying, hey, I'm not going to keep showing up for someone who isn't showing up for me. Avoidants often rely on others to bridge the emotional gap, to keep pursuing, explaining, and fixing. When you stop doing that, you shift the dynamic entirely. You're no longer feeding the cycle. You're breaking it. There's a quiet power in not reacting, not chasing, not needing to explain yourself again. Avoidants expect others to fill in the emotional space they leave behind. They've often learned that if they pull away, someone will come after them, and that keeps them in control. But when you remove yourself with dignity, not drama, they're forced to deal with something they didn't expect in your absence. And more importantly, your self-assurance. Choosing no contact is a boundary. It's saying, if you can't meet in a space of honesty, emotional intimacy, and consistency, then I'm not going to keep showing up just to be hurt. Boundaries aren't about controlling others. They're about defining what you will and will not accept. And sometimes, the only way to draw that boundary is through silence, distance, and detachment. It's also important to understand that boundaries aren't just for them. They're for you. You might feel tempted to break no contact when you're lonely, nostalgic, or second-guessing your decision. That's normal. But when those feelings come up, remind yourself that choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and self-worth over longing isn't punishment, it's growth. You're giving yourself the space to heal, reflect, and realign with the kind of love you actually deserve, one that doesn't require chasing or explaining. No contact isn't a power play. It's a return to your own power. And when you choose it not out of anger, but out of respect for yourself, it becomes one of the most transformative decisions you can make. One of the most surprising outcomes of going no contact is that it often ends up changing you more than the other person. When people talk about breaking an avoidant or making them realize what they lost, they tend to focus on the external shift, hoping the avoidant will come back, confess their feelings, or finally step up. But the deeper transformation happens internally in you. The cycle you were trapped in, of overgiving, overthinking, and trying to earn someone's love, starts to lose its grip. And as painful as it can be, no contact becomes the exact pressure point that snaps you out of that emotional pattern. When you've spent so long focused on someone who's inconsistent or emotionally unavailable, your self-worth starts to get entangled with their approval. You begin measuring your value by how much they respond, how close they get, or whether you can make it work. And because avoidants often give just enough to keep you hopeful, but not enough to truly meet your needs, it becomes easy to stay hooked. The relationship becomes less about mutual love and more about proving your worth, convincing someone to choose you. But the moment you go no contact, that dynamic starts to unravel. You begin to see that you don't have to chase love, that it's not your job to earn someone's emotional availability. With time and space, your attention starts to return to yourself. Not the version of you that was trying to fit into someone else's limited capacity, but the real you. The grounded, self-respecting version of you who knows that love isn't something that should feel like a battle. As the emotional fog lifts, you may realize how much of yourself you abandoned in the process of trying to hold on to someone else. You see where you ignored your intuition, tolerated breadcrumbs, or excused behavior that didn't with the love you truly wanted. And that realization can be painful, but it's also liberating. Because now, this isn't about you're not just waiting for someone to wake up and love you better. You're choosing to love yourself better. The transformation doesn't come from them missing you. It comes from you no longer missing yourself. You stop living in emotional limbo, constantly hoping they'll come around, and start building a foundation within yourself. You realize that peace is better than potential, that consistency is more valuable than intensity, and that the version of you who walks away, who lets go, who doesn't beg to be seen, that version is strong, whole, and worthy of a deeper love. Even if the avoidant does come back, you're different now. You're not waiting in the same place they left you. You've grown and healed. From that space. You can choose more wisely, not from fear or longing, but from clarity and self-respect. No contact doesn't just break the avoidance emotional pattern. It ends the cycle that kept you small. And in doing so, it helps you rise, not as someone chasing love, but as someone who finally remembers they deserve it. This isn't about you. Thank you so much for listening. If you're in a situation like this, know that you're not alone. It takes incredible strength to walk away from someone you care about, but it takes even more strength to walk back to yourself. You're not too much. You're not hard to love. You've just outgrown situations that ask you to shrink. Take care of your heart, not protect your peace. And remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone else is to finally love yourself enough to let go. Goodbye for now, and thank you. You've got this.